Celeste Wallander, former Assistant U.S. Secretary of Defense, thanks for joining me on American Dialogues.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
Today, Secretary Marco Rubio struck a softer tone toward Europe today, but his description of the United States as a child of Europe remains puzzling to me. How do you read it?
Well, I think that Secretary Rubio's tone and demeanor was very appropriate of a conversation with allies and partners. And I believe I'm hearing that it was welcomed by Europeans. The difference from last year's tone from Vice President J.D. Vance was very clear. I think it was deliberate. That said, I think the message was much the same. The message was the United States has a clear sense of what it wants. It would like Europe to agree and get on board and do what and how the United States wants to have a partnership. And so both things were true. So it's an improvement, but it's still the same message.
What are the implications if the United States is perceived as stepping back from its role as the world's policeman?
Well, first of all, there have been clear statements from President Trump and other administration officials along those lines. And in the case of Europe in particular, it has been consistent and clear that the United States expects Europe to be able to defend itself alone. Now, the United States says that it continues to value NATO and it will continue to sustain the extended nuclear umbrella over Europe. But, Secretary Rubio and President Trump and Secretary Hegseth have all said very clearly that Europe needs to be able to defend itself alone. So that is a stepping back because for a century, the United States and Europe have worked together in defending our countries.
There was a report by The Telegraph this week about the US handing 3 major NATO commands to European countries, including the Atlantic Command to Britain. How significant is this?
It is significant. I mean, there's always been sharing among commands within NATO. NATO is an alliance of 32 countries, and they do share responsibilities and opportunities for leadership. But those are, the ones you noted, are very significant commands and require a level of experience and authority over multiple military formations and a close awareness of not just NATO plans, but American military plans. So it is a significant signal of fulfilling that goal to have Europe defend itself.
Do you think this has to do with Greenland? A deal probably on that.
No, I don't think it has to do specifically with Greenland. I think the determination to reduce American military footprint in Europe is longstanding. It was clear in the first Trump administration, and now that he's been elected to a second term, they're implementing a goal that they articulated. So I think that is longstanding and is about that pulling away of American forces from abroad in order to be able, in the Trump administration's framing, to be available for Western Hemisphere military affairs. Greenland is a separate specific issue that the White House has put on the table that is focused in its own telling about preventing China from having access to a country right now, Greenland, that is close to American borders.
Right. So President Zelensky today said that Washington too often pressures Kyiv to make concessions while demanding little more from Moscow. Is that a fair criticism?
I think it is fair, his assessment that Ukraine has been expected to compromise, to accept losses, and to come closer to Russian negotiating positions than Moscow in the course of these negotiations has been expected to come closer to Ukrainian negotiation positions. And that would be difficult for Ukraine if this were a balanced conflict. But the reality is Russia is an invading force. Russia is in violation of international law. And so I think it's especially a bitter pill for the Ukrainians to be expected to reward an aggressor that is a violator of international law.
Do you think that European allies now are more calm when it comes to assurances from the US?
I would characterize it that Europeans are very realistic. They understand that this is a strategy of the Trump administration that the President Trump cannot be dissuaded from, to pull back from Europe and continue to press Europe to be able to defend itself with a backup of the United States, but really not a forward leadership presence. And so they don't welcome it, but they understand it. And they are beginning to put in place policies to cope with that, including enhanced defense procurement, growing the size of their militaries. I heard several briefings while I was here at Munich about the intentions for growing in capabilities and size of European armies, navies, and air forces. So they're going to respond. It's not that they accept it as a good outcome, but they understand that that's what they need to do.
I will ask you a question also about the Middle East. So the US has deployed the aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln to the Middle East, with another carrier reportedly heading to the region. Does this level of military buildup indicate preparation for possible strikes on Iran, or would an operation aimed at regime change require a far larger resources and probably more fundamentally different force posture?
So the scope of the reported deployments is significant, and it is beyond what, for example, in the past the United States has deployed to intercept Iranian missiles directed against either Israel or American forces deployed in various countries in the Middle East. And so it suggests the possibility that there is a serious military plan that might be implemented against Iran. I cannot speculate. Of course, I've not seen such a plan, but the variety, scale, scope, and not entirely unprecedented, but unusual scale and scope of the deployment does suggest at least signaling that the United States might be willing and ready to implement such a plan, or that it really does intend to. So I think it should be taken quite seriously.
I remember the director of Chatham House in London was saying that we are witnessing the end of the Western alliance. What do you think of that?
I think we aren't witnessing the end of the transatlantic alliance. We I think we certainly are witnessing an evolution of that alliance to a new reality in which the historic leader of that alliance believes, at least this administration, the Trump administration, believes in putting power more forward in the form of its leadership than previous administrations had chosen. So the alliance, of course, has to evolve. It remains unclear, and it depends a great deal on the actions of European allies, the United States, but also adversaries such as Russia, whether that alliance will begin to disintegrate or will simply adapt to these new circumstances. And coming back to the original topic we touched upon, I think Secretary Rubio's tone and message allowed for an evolution that could be constructive. And personally, that is the outcome that I would be hoping to support and I would most like to see.
If allies perceive strategic ambiguity from Washington, does that risk emboldening Moscow and Beijing?
I think strategic ambiguity is useful sometimes in a specific crisis to signal possible intent. But more broadly speaking, when you're facing an adversary like Russia, whose leadership has identified the United States as a threat to Russia itself, strategic ambiguity is counterproductive. Clarity of the determination to defend American interests at home and abroad, and American people and American economy is really important in the face of such an adversary. So I would hope that that kind of messaging is something the White House is determined to do, even as the transatlantic alliance undergoes this evolution.
Mhm. And this lack of clarity is also challenging for Arab states when it comes to Iran, for example. Um, how should Arab states, the Gulf states, should approach the Trump policy toward Iran? Something that we don't know. Is he going to strike or not? Big question.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I would say that the leaderships of countries in the region have excellent relationships with the White House. And I am sure that they are having close consultations with the Department of Defense, Department of War. It's actually legally the Department of Defense, the Department of Defense, the Department of State, and with the White House to understand the objectives of this policy of these military movements. And I'm confident that those strong relationships are helping leaderships in those countries to better understand the administration's intentions and how it intends to manage this new development in the Middle East.
I will conclude with one question. And since you just said Department of War, Department of Defense, to what extent Trump policies would have, really far-reaching and long-term impact on the position of the United States in the world?
Well, I guess, as an American, I'm more an observer of this than a definer of it. But I think what I would say is I'm hearing here in the Munich Security Conference significant changes in assessments of the United States, our reliability, our likely actions, and that it is not just the United States that is shaping that future, but it is the consequent policies of other countries that will shape that future. And I think I already spoke to this a little bit. I think you'll see many countries diversifying their relationships, reducing their dependence on American trade, American finance, and in some cases on American defense production, purchases of defense capabilities from the United States, and certainly not always counting on the US to be willing to engage in joint military operations for common goals. And so the adjustments will happen on the US side, but they will also happen on the part of our allies and partners abroad.
Do you think the US now is in a better place than it was during the Biden era?
I think it is difficult to predict because, again, it's not just what the United States does, it's what other countries do, friends, but also adversaries. It is possible that adversaries such as Russia, Iran, China, and North Korea will exploit this period of change and uncertainty to try to take advantage. And I would hope that the trust that does exist between allies and partners in Europe, in the Asia Pacific, and also in the Middle East will see us through this period of change.
Well, Solicit Wallander, former Assistant U.S. Secretary of Defense, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. I'm really grateful to have been with you.